Hey guys, Spud here, as always, and today we're going over the very bare-bones basics of dropping laser-guided bombs from the upcoming DCS F-15E Strike Eagle from RAZBAM. Now we've got a bit of a situation here. Some Iranian C-130s have landed at an abandoned airfield in the middle of the Sinai Peninsula to deliver weapons to various militant groups that call the Sinai Peninsula home that have been giving the Egyptian government a bit of trouble as of late. Now, some USAF F-15E Strike Eagles have been tasked to intervene on behalf of the Egyptian government to attack these C-130s and hopefully destroy the weapons being smuggled to the militants. Keep in mind, guys, that the F-15E is still on pre-order sale for 30% off on the Eagle Dynamics store, so let's hop in the cockpit and get started. Alright guys, welcome back to the office of the F-15E Strike Eagle, and we'll hop right into our basics of LGB delivery tutorial. We're utilizing an air start today in order to mimic a very simple practice mission you might create for yourself in the mission editor on day 1 of early access release. And because utilizing an air start in the F-15E means we have a little bit of extra setup to complete that would normally be part of your cold start procedure for yourself in the front seat or for your Wizzo in the back seat on a multi-crew flight. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the HOTAS commands that we're going to need in order to deliver our warheads onto foreheads. We'll hit escape on our keyboard, we'll go to adjust controls, and we're in our F-15E category, and we'll scroll on down to our HOTAS subcategory. Now, a lot of the HOTAS commands we talk about today are going to be used for many different things in the cockpit of your F-15E. However, we're going to limit our scope of the discussion today to just the delivery of laser-guided bombs. First off, starting from the top, we have our auto acquisition switch forward. Now, this has two actions that can influence our LANTIRN Targeting Pod. Auto acquisition switch forward long, which is a press of 1 second or longer, will return our pod from being slave to a waypoint to snowplow mode. Auto acquisition for a switch forward short will step our pod between the 3 different field of view zooms that are available to the LANTIRN Targeting Pod. Those of you guys who fly the F-14 AMD Tomcat and fly strike missions with the LANTIRN Pod will be very familiar with those 3 steps of zoom. Next, we have our castle switch, press, left, right, forward, and aft. This switch allows us to take command of the various displays in the cockpit of our F-15E. It's essentially the same thing as setting a SOI in your F-16C Viper or going sensor select switch towards the screen you want to take command of in your F-18C Hornet. It's basically exactly the same. Next, moving down the list, we have our left multifunction switch. Now, to be realistic, you want to put this switch to the left-hand side forward on your throttle grip. It's a very simple button. All it does in our instance today is fire the laser down to the target for a nice laser spot for the bang-bang guidance of our laser-guided bomb to put it right in the middle of our target for a perfect shack. Now, you'll notice I also have this double bound to my stick as well. I'm currently using a Thrustmaster FA-18C stick grip on my VPC Warbird base. Now, the FA-18C stick grip from Wing Wing and Thrustmaster actually have an extra button molded into them that the F-15E doesn't use. That's your FLIR RAID FOV button. And so you have a nice extra little button on your FA-18C sticks to utilize for something in the F-15E. Later on in the video, we'll take a look at the stick, and you'll actually notice that that RAID FLIR FOV step button is not molded into the stick in the F-15E's front seat. Kind of interesting. Moving on down the list, we have our TDC switch press. Now, the throttle designator controller is incredibly important, of course, and we need to have left, right, down, and up mapped as well. However, I have these mapped to an axis on the front of my VPC CM3 throttle. If you have a little thumbstick or some other axis that you can use for your throttle designator controller, I highly recommend it. Being bound to just the X and Y axes of moving the pod up, down, left, and right is not as efficient as being able to move the pod diagonally across the ground in order to get your crosshairs onto a target as quickly as possible. Next, of course, we have our weapon release pickle button, which is important for obvious reasons. We need to be able to authorize the aircraft to automatically drop the weapon in the auto release function. So we're good with that, so we'll hit OK and we'll head on back to the cockpit. Let's go ahead and shed a little bit of extra light on the subject, just in case it's harder for you guys to see on YouTube. We'll turn up our console and instrument lighting, and we'll turn on our floodlights. And we can see those very cool, slime greenish floodlights have made a return from RAZBAM's AV-8B Harrier to the F-15E Strike Eagle. Always thought that was a cool addition to the AV-8B, and it's nice to see that they still look pretty darn cool in the F-15E. Alright. We'll reduce our pilot workload by turning on the autopilot. To turn on the autopilot, just hit the A/P push tile on your UFC, and click on altitude hold. In order to turn on barometric altitude hold, you can switch that back and forth between radar altimeter hold and barometric altitude hold by hitting the line select key just below altitude hold. And if we switch her over to either air-to-ground master mode or navigational master mode, we have another option that pops up for steering mode nav. If we turn this on, the aircraft will automatically fly us to our currently selected steer point. We'll go ahead and set our master arm switch to the arm position. Just like every other RAZBAM aircraft, the aircraft will start with master arm safe in an air start. We'll open up our armament page, go to the air-to-ground portion to set up our packs for program 1. We'll select our GVU-12s on our left CFT. We'll go for an auto release, ripple single to release a single weapon, nose and tail for the fusing for an instant detonation on impact. We'll step to program 2. We'll set up our 6 Mark 82s on our right CFT. We'll go for a CIDP release, ripple multiple, nose and tail, quantity 11 to drop all bombs on one press of the pickle button, and we'll do an interval of 50 milliseconds between each ripple impulse. We'll scroll back to program 1 to release our GVU-12s for today's tutorial. We'll go ahead and open up our T-Pod page on the right MPD, and we'll take command of that page by going castle switch right long. When you see these little vertical strakes along the bottom of the page that you currently want to take command of, you know that you now have your TDC slaved to that page. Up on the HUD, we can see the field of view of the targeting pod superimposed on the HUD by this broken box. And as we move our TDC around, we can see that start to move. Pretty simple and easy. Let's take a look at our TSD. Looking at the stick, we can see it differs from the FA-18C stick only in that it does not have the RAID FOV FLIR button molded into it. You can see where that would be mounted, molded into the stick itself, however, it is missing in the F-15E. Kind of interesting, like I said earlier. We'll adjust our zoom here a little bit, and we'll adjust our brightness to make it a little easier for you guys to see. We currently have a target point set in the mission editor. To set a target point as part of your flight plan in the mission editor, in the name of the waypoint, just call it #T for target. This will automatically assign that waypoint as a target in the aircraft when you spawn into it, with the preceding waypoint being turned into an IP or initial point. Zooming out a little bit, we can also see your origination point, whether an air start or you start on the ground cold and dark or hot on the ground, is always going to be your home plate symbol, even though we did not actually start at an air base. So just something to keep in mind is all. Looking at our T-Pod page, we'll take a look at all of the different options that we have available to us. Starting from the top left, we can see that our laser is armed and will be sparkling 1688. This is also duplicated over here on the right-hand side of the instrument panel. We can see that our laser is armed. If for whatever reason your laser is not armed or your pod is not unstowed, In the rear seat, just aft of the left-hand controller, we have our laser arm switch, and we have our stow-unstow switch for the targeting pod to turn the pod off, to standby, or on. Back in the front seat here, ALAS is not functional at the moment in the F-15E. The second to the right OSB button allows us to slave the pod between waypoints on our flight plan. And auto acquisition switch forward long returns the pod back to snowplow mode. Let's go ahead and slave our pod over to our target point of steer point 2. The declutter button declutters the screen. I don't usually find this to be all that useful. The expand button is very important in the LANTIRN Targeting Pod. If we do not box expand, we only have 2 steps of zoom available to us in the F-15E with the LANTIRN pod. However, if we box expand, we now have all 3 steps of zoom available to us. Remember, this is auto acquisition switch forward short. T1 brings us to a second page, mostly for use by the Wizzo to bore sight the targeting pod while on the ground. Menu button, of course. We can switch between area track and point track. We can also change between whether the pod in point track will track black point, automatic, or white point, depending on whether you're using white hot or black hot mode. Keep in mind that a targeting pod doesn't know what a tank is or doesn't know what an aircraft is on the ground. All it knows is to track the difference between colors between a white-black background and a black object, or a black object and a white background. We can influence what TDC depress does, whether we want to update a point, create a target for a target designation, queue a sensor, create a mark point, update that mark point, or back to a target designation. 99% of the time, you're going to be using it as a target designation. We can switch the pod between air-to-air and air-to-ground mode at the press of a button. We can go between white-hot and black-hot mode. And we can change between automatic level and gain and manual level and gain by pressing this button here. To change a laser code with your targeting pod, simply type in a code in your scratch pad, 1577 for instance, and click on the arm button, and we can see that the pod will now be sparkling on 1577. Now the bombs on our aircraft are on the default code of 1688, so we'll go back to that, 1688, and we're back to shining on 1688. Alright. Basically everything from here is more or less exactly the same as the way you engage targets with any other 4th generation aircraft that we have in DCS, like the F-16 or FA-18. So we'll go ahead and knock the autopilot off. We'll go back to the main menu of our UFC, 2 period for our target point. We'll zoom our pod in. And I think we can start to see some of those bad C-130s down there, and maybe some vehicles around them. So we'll put our crosshair over the top, TDC depressed to designate a target, and we'll just keep turning into our target area here. We can now see our ASL, or azimuth steering line, and unlike other aircraft in DCS where the ASL is simply just a vertical line that covers the whole HUD, we can see the ASL actually originates from our target point down there. And of course we can see the segmented box that shows us where the targeting pod is currently looking. Kind of interesting. We can see we have a target point selected, the distance of the target, the time to release, and the mode at which we'll be releasing, which is automatic mode. So just like any other aircraft, we need to fly on top of the ASL, or as close to it as possible for as accurate of a weapon delivery as possible to make sure that our laser-guided bomb falls within the laser basket to start tracking the laser. we can see that the visual fidelity of the LANTIRN Targeting Pod isn't the best, but it's a heck of a lot better than the implementation in the F-15A and B Tomcat, because we have a digital display that is displaying the feed from our targeting pod. "40 seconds to release. Looks like there's some personnel down there and some vehicles around that C-130. Just making small corrections as we get closer and closer to releasing our weapon. 10 seconds. Here comes the release cue, so we'll press and hold our stores release pickle button. And weapon away. 35 seconds to impact. We are automatically lasing because we're flying and dropping on a target designated point. Taking 10 seconds to impact. You can definitely see some personnel down there around the C-130. And impact. Looks like a good shack. That C-130 is missing its wings and it's never going to fly again. Alright. Let's go ahead and come around for a re-attack on our second C-130. For this re-attack, let's pretend that we're engaging a target of opportunity where we do not have a target point set. So that way we have to manually fire a laser rather than having an automatic laze for us. So we'll go to steer point 1, which was our IP point. And at this point, with steer point 1 selected, which is not a target point set in the INS of our aircraft, the laser will not automatically fire for us when we release our laser-guided bomb. And that's where we have to use our left multifunction button. So we'll just build up a little bit of separation from our target area here. We'll create a new designation so that way we can see how far away we are from our target. Now, a lot of people are wondering out there, how does the F-15E fly compared to other aircraft in DCS? Now, the F-15E, contrary to what a lot of people believe, is not a fly-by-wire aircraft. It is hydraulically boosted manual controls. So it does not fly nearly as forgivingly, not nearly as precisely as, say, the FCS and the FA-18C or F-16C, but the aerodynamic design of the F-15 is inherently far more stable and does not have nearly as many quirks to it as the F-14A and B Tomcat. So I like to describe flying the F-15E, the way it feels as well as kind of the difficulty level of it, as being somewhere in between a F-14B Tomcat and FA-18C Hornet. You can definitely feel that it flies far more like a conventional aircraft than a fly-by-wire FA-18C or F-16C. As a result, it is definitely more challenging to fly, and that's why it's great that we can potentially have a Wizzo in the back seat to help us out and take some of the pilot workload away from us. However, just flying in a very non-contested environment like we are today, it's really not a hard airplane to fly. Alright, looks like our target area is right behind that cloud right there, unfortunately. Looks like it maybe should have turned right off the target area. Well, that's alright, we'll make it work. Something also to note is with Master Arm on in air-to-ground mode, you have a hot trigger constantly, and it's very easy to accidentally fire your gun if you accidentally squeeze the trigger instead of pushing on the pickle button, just like in the F-14 Tomcat, where I can't tell you how many times I've seen people accidentally fire their gun instead of dropping a bomb, which is kind of funny. Alright. We will designate the next C-130 as a target. Beautiful. designated the target, and we'll fly on in. Again, guys, keep in mind here that we're treating this one as a target of opportunity. We do not have a target point set in the mission editor or in our INS at the moment, so we're going to have to actually fire our laser manually after we drop our laser-guided weapon. Alright, we can see the airfield down there. There's our ASL. We'll start to roll out on the ASL. Beautiful. We'll kind of update our target area here, just make it absolutely perfect right on top of that C-130. We can see some vehicles down there and some personnel as well. 15 seconds to release. There's the release cue, pressing and holding our weapon release/pickle button. Weapons released. Lasers firing with the left multifunction switch pressed when I release the weapon. Ten seconds to impact. And impact. Nice. Another good shot. Go ahead and press our left multifunction switch again to turn off our laser. And we are ready to head off away from our target. So I hope this was illuminating for you guys and shows you just how easy it is to drop a laser-guided bomb from the F-15E Strike Eagle, and shows you guys how to set things up from an air start, because like I said earlier, we do not have the packs set up for us automatically on an air start in the F-15E. This is something we would normally do as part of our cold start in the front seat if we're flying solo, or that our Wizzo would take care of in the back seat if we're flying with a multi-crew flight in DCS World Multiplayer. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please give it a like and a subscribe, and we will see ya in the next one. Fly safe out there, guys, and enjoy this beautiful game.